Hi, Jaco. How are you today?
Hey Jenny, it's good to be here.
Good to have
Thank you,
you.
thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, same here,
Mm,
actually. We have so much to talk about. So,
mm.
Jaco, I met you about a month and a half ago at a
Yes.
free speech union event in Belfast, and you actually gave this very impassioned remark during the talk itself,
Mm.
and I had my eye on you after that, and I was like, "Oh, I must chat to this man. I like him. I like the cut of his jib," and then afterwards we had a couple drinks and a long chat, and it was fantastic. So you are, for my audience at Saving Culture from Itself, you are Jaco Van Zyl.
That's good.
Okay, Van Zyl. Okay, sorry. And
That's good.
you are South African,
Yes.
clinical psychologist in private practice, and you are on the same island as I am,
Yes.
across the border.
Yeah.
How long have
Yeah.
you been living in Ireland?
So it's just over 3 years. So my husband and myself, we moved over towards the end of 2021, just to finalize registration for me to practice over here. And
Oh,
our final move across was in February 2022. So we're just over 3 years here in Ireland.
wow.
Mm.
Well, one of the being from South Africa is highly topical at the moment.
Mm.
And we've only touched on it in our prior chats very, very briefly. And you were just saying before we hit record that you've been following closely the headlines and the stories
Mm.
about
Mm.
the South African president or prime minister,
No, President.
president, um,
Yeah.
and his press
Entourage.
conference. Yeah, and
Mm.
yes, and their press conference with Trump, which I
Yes.
actually haven't been following very closely.
Oh, no.
Now, I have been aware for many, many years that there is a high level of violence in South Africa. This goes back
Mm.
to sort of the 90s. I mean, my knowledge of it. I have a friend. I had a friend who went there for a year, sort of like on a gap year, and I remember her telling me stories about having to have an armed guard escort her from the supermarket door
Mm.
to the car,
Mm.
and this was in the mid to late 90s. So the fact that people were surprised by Trump calling this man on the carpet to chastise him about the violence was a surprise to me. But obviously, you're from there. So why don't you
Mm.
start with the press conference and your thoughts on that and work backwards?
Yeah. Look, when we heard that Ramaphosa, Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of South Africa and his entourage were going over to see Donald Trump, uh, I was quite excited because I think there were quite a few things that had to be exposed, a few things that had to be straightened out, and to just set the record straight about South Africa. Many people think of South Africa and they think of Nelson Mandela and they think of apartheid, and
Yeah.
that's it. So the evil white man oppressing black people, um, Nelson Mandela as the Messiah who released them and redeemed us all, and suddenly there was an introduction of this rainbow nation. And to be fair, for a period of time, we did enjoy the euphoria of a type of a rainbow nation. I think 1995 with the Rugby World Cup when South Africa beat the All Blacks and Mandela wearing his Springbok jersey and the way he used rugby, which was traditionally predominantly a sport played predominantly by white people, whereas soccer predominantly by black people, to use that as a platform to bring people together. That was very noble. It was very symbolic. He really had a reconciliatory spirit to him.
Mm.
By all means, look, he has a rough and complicated background as well, and he was during the apartheid years. He was involved in terrorism, the Church Street bombing that killed a few innocent white people. So it does have a bit of a checkered past. So 1994 was the introduction of democracy in South Africa. It was a constitutional democracy. Our constitution was hailed as some of the most progressive and liberal democracies in the world, or constitutions in the world. And for a few years, things went very, very well. There was significant economic growth in South Africa, about between 3% and 5% economic growth. until about 2008, when the wheels started to come off with the appointment of a new president, President Jacob Zuma.
Mm.
So your friend around the 90s, that was when I was young. We started putting burglar proofing on our windows and like slam shut doors, just for additional protection. But in general, yards were open or properties were open. Children would be playing in the street. I grew up in a very small town, beautiful little town, Marble Hall, towards the northeast of the country, and unforgettable memories. I also had family members who were my uncle and aunt, as well as my grandparents, who were living on farms. And because of that, I also had contact with the African folk, and
Mm.
and I'm very proud to say that I have a mixed heritage. I have a mixed heritage because of that exposure
Right.
to specifically, people talk about African culture. There's no such thing as just African culture. There are diverse cultures within Africa. They're as diverse as the British are different from the Russians, even though they're both white. So the same with Africa. And that's also one of the reasons why I speak an African language, or actually 3 African languages.
Wow.
So yeah, that was in the 90s, but gradually things started to deteriorate. Not only that, we started to notice that pieces of legislation were being enacted that were too sinister to just ignore. For instance, employment equity, where they started to introduce quota systems of employment. And the rationale was quota systems to correct the iniquities of the past. It sounds noble, it sounds good and reasonable, and obviously the injustice of the past need to be addressed in a way that would address them as opposed to exacerbate conditions. But then it gradually felt like the noose was tightened. White people in top positions of essential industries like water provision, electricity supply, municipal management, banks. Banks were largely private, so that was fine. But, whatever they did, they would be the only ones benefiting or being harmed by it. But mostly in government, white people were replaced by black people, and the conditions of such replacement. So when you say we want to address the iniquities of the past, what you're trying to say, that was the understanding, that previously disadvantaged people would now be given the opportunity to participate in the economy. When you replace top management with people who may be black, but who are rich, politically connected, or come from wealthy black families, you're not addressing what you're saying you're addressing. So we started noticing that what they were saying they were doing was actually happening with 2 different things. But it was so easy to have these sinister agendas being pushed, and to disguise them in this good sounding language, and to pivot, to be doing what is actually, I don't know, heinous, dishonest, corrupt, but to pivot and to hide behind these good sounding maxims. And
So,
then
sorry,
from
quick question. So were the black people taking up these quota allotted jobs, they were from the rich connected families?
most of them were, yes. So that is what we call cadre, CADRE, cadre deployment. So people who are politically connected, who assume these positions, many of whom were not well qualified. In other words, many of these industries just gradually deteriorated and collapsed, such that we have load shedding in South Africa now. We even have water shortages because of the lack of upkeep. The gradual deterioration of infrastructure that had been constructed over many decades, even centuries, police system deteriorating, such that people need to have alarm systems in their houses, electric fencing, dangerous dogs, private security, name it. It's quite expensive to live there in South Africa, and you run into incompetency all the time. So we have a competency problem in South Africa, and secondly, we have a values problem in South Africa, where not only are people not incompetent, in other words, they don't realize or they don't know what they don't know. Secondly, they embody or enact value systems that are not conducive to the flourishing of a society. So there's a lot of cronyism, nepotism, corruption with COVID, for instance. The funding that was given to South Africa to purchase vaccines, hundreds of millions of rands were stolen.
Wow.
They were stolen. They were meant to save people. They were meant to purchase vaccines to save people. Because that money was stolen, vaccines were rolled out much later than they were supposed to. And because of that, people died unnecessarily. My husband's two parents died a week apart. My husband couldn't get vaccinated. And because of that, he got severely ill. He was put on a ventilator, and he lay 3 beds away from his mother.
Oh dear, that's terrible.
It was heart-wrenching to see that. One of the nannies who raised me, so I was raised by 2 nannies, one during my very early years and up until adolescence, and then my parents got divorced, and she left us. I still have contact with her. She's a wonderful woman. Her name is Anna Mukalapa, and I regard her as like a mother to me. And then after her, someone else who used to work, she was a foreman on the farm, which my uncle used to own. She started working for us, and she tragically died in 2014. And she died because of negligence in a hospital that was so badly run that people were not receiving the healthcare that they required. So this dismal deterioration started in 2008, when they really ramped up the rapidity, the rate at which radical economic transformation and radical economic transformation. You know, you can be assured there are only 2 kinds of people who talk about economics. They're either experts or they're communists. They talk about economics all the time. Radical economic transformation.
So that's a red flag.
That's a red flag. And then also National Democratic Revolution, NDR. And these were missions that were introduced by Jacob Zuma, who went to the Soviet Union, who was trained by the Soviets, and he started implementing Soviet-style race Marxism. Soviet-style race Marxism in South Africa, and gradually the noose tightened. So initially, for a private company to be doing business with government, 30% of the company had to belong to someone of the previously disadvantaged community, 30%. Eventually that was adjusted, gradually the noose tightened, to 51%. In other words, a white business owner who may have lost his position at the electricity provision, Eskom, or the railways, or at some municipality. And suppose he started his own business. For him to continue doing, or to have business dealings with the government, he practically had to give his business away. 51% had to belong to someone else.
So it's expropriation.
A type of expropriation, right? And this then gradually even further tightened, so this was called broad-based. So initially it was black economic empowerment, and then secondly it was broad-based, BEE, black economic empowerment, the 51%. Now they're proposing legislation that would target farmers, that unless the farmer gives part of a certain percentage of its equity away, that their water supply would be rationed or would be cut. I mean, South Africa is a semi-arid country. Actually, only 20% of South Africa is fertile. And guess who owns 20% of that? Not white people. The Zulus, the Zulu kingdom in KwaZulu-Natal towards the east. Fertile, beautiful land. And the Zulus have been living there for centuries. Um, so another piece of legislation is, and it's now being proposed, that if you own a company and you have more than 50 employees, there are certain quotas that you need to abide by in terms of the race ratio of employees working for you, whether you're having dealings with the government or not, private companies. And if you don't comply, you need to explain why you don't comply at the risk of being criminally charged. So you see this race Marxism, this demand of this demand of equality of outcomes. The outcomes need to reflect the demographics of a country, and this is imposed upon a country from a central authoritarian state.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful. So it is Soviet style, like I said. The social engineering is obvious, and it's not like old Leninism or Marxism. It's race Marxism.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, just one other thing, another piece of legislation that was signed into law. We have what we call a government of national unity, because for the first time in the history of democratic South Africa, the African National Congress, the ANC, that was founded in 1914, 1916, thereabouts, which Mandela was part of. They got less than 50% of the votes, so they're sharing power with the largest opposition, the Democratic Alliance, and a few small other parties. So, without even consulting the rest of the parties, Cyril Ramaphosa signed into law this new legislation called expropriation without compensation, where, however the government feels they could justify it. Remember what I said, the pivoting? So they would do what is criminal, but they would pivot with their sweet-sounding excuses. They could expropriate any property, not just physical property. They could expropriate your car, your your laptop, whatever. All right. Some people say yes, but we're not going to use it. But it is very much like having how can I put it? Like having a dangerous weapon in your house with children running around. It's only a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
So and we also need to keep in mind, and this is Gramscian communism or socialism, the long march through the institutions and the patience of it. They prepare everything. It is a slow process, a slow tightening of the noose. And as one person supersedes and succeeds, the one leader succeeds another, the right leader will come and will implement that legislation, and it will be chaos. So since 2008, there has been a rapid deterioration of in South Africa. Economic growth is non-existent. So the population growth is 2%, economic growth is 1%. So there is a halving of economic growth in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a failed state. It's
right.
a failed state. And they have this rhetoric that everything is justified. Like you and I spoke about the other evening. No act from their side could be so immoral, could be so heinous, that it would be deemed unwarranted.
Has there been white opposition in terms of in the legislature, like MPs or elected representatives who have a political coalition who have put up an opposition to this sort of um, ratcheting up of the race Marxism.
Yeah. So you need to appreciate that initially this race obsession wasn't that pronounced.
Interesting.
Okay. So the race obsession wasn't that pronounced. Even initially with the initial voting, many white people voted for the African National Congress.
Yeah.
They wanted South Africa to work. And even black people, they wanted South Africa to work. Even today, a large proportion of people of all races in South Africa want to tell a success story in South Africa. But it was around, I would say, maybe 2006, when there was a young politician called Julius Malema, and he ascended to power when he established his communist party called the Economic Freedom Front, the Freedom Fighters. Again, economic. Is he an expert? No. So then he must be a communist. And they right from the beginning, he made it clear that white people are culpable of everything going wrong in South Africa, and there is no redemption possible. They need to hand over everything. And it was interesting to see how the rhetoric changed, where the initial focus was very much on apartheid and mourning the tragedy that apartheid was. You and I can discuss, apartheid also. The initial idea behind apartheid and how it eventually deteriorated into a very oppressive system. But so, and his party started growing and growing and growing, and his target initially was the Afrikaner, and then eventually it moved over to all white people, and later it moved over to also include Indian people. Now, Indians, they're Tamil, Gujarati, Sanskrit, Malayalam. So various different Indian tribes were imported into South Africa around 1860, predominantly by the British, to work as indentured slaves in what is now KwaZulu-Natal, mainly in the sugarcane agriculture sector. But those Indian slaves, they were so successful in establishing their own businesses and flourishing that they're among the richest people in South Africa now. So there are few things as irritating as, especially to a communist, as a successful minority.
Yes.
Ask any Jew.
Yes.
All right, we can just think about the Jewish people.
Yep.
We can just think about the Tutsi people in Rwanda and the Twa people in Rwanda. They were also a successful minority, and it grated on the Hutus for many years until there was the Rwandan genocide in 1994. So this race obsession just exacerbated over the years, especially by this specific individual, the Economic Freedom Fighters leader, and Jacob Zuma, who also later became the president. Corrupt, irredeemably corrupt president. He was later convicted because of 200 and something charges. He was implicated in state capture. In other words, he handed certain state-owned enterprises to a certain family, the Gupta family, obviously for some kickbacks. And that, I mean, it's a conspiracy theory, and until the evidence starts to present itself, and you realize this should be a freaking movie. That is how uncanny this was.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and they have enchanted this song, "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer," for so many years, and eventually this thing has been challenged in court. And because of the deterioration, like I said, of so many aspects of South African society, sadly also including the judiciary, this
Wait,
challenge
the challenge is to the chant or to
the chant, so that they would stop chanting this thing, because it's an incitement to violence. but it went up to the Supreme Court of South Africa, or the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and there's nothing we can do because they declared this to be protected now.
Wow.
Right.
Well,
Now,
that's a good segue, actually. Do you mind? Because
yeah,
so when you saw is it Ramaphosa?
Ramaphosa.
Ramaphosa
Hmm.
in the White House with Trump, what thoughts came to mind?
Well, the first thing I thought was that he's going to get a tongue lashing because South Africa has also been involved in taking Israel to the International Court of Justice.
Of course, that's right. I forgot about that.
And Trump earlier issued an executive order declaring Afrikaners to be welcomed as refugees to America because of this targeted animosity towards Afrikaners, many of whom live on farms, many of whom have been attacked and slaughtered on farms. So actually, before I go into that direction, I just want to answer your question in terms of whether there were any white people opposing this. Yes, there's a very small party called the Freedom Front Plus. They're a small Afrikaner party. They don't get that many votes. I think 2 or 3%. The DA, there's a large contingency of white people voting for the DA, and they're the Democratic Alliance, and they're now co-ruling, if you can call it that, co-governing with the ANC. And the DA also runs the Western Cape, and the Western Cape is in many regards so much different from the rest of South Africa because systems are functioning very, very well in the Western Cape. The Western Cape is very well run. But the white population in South Africa under apartheid was about 20%. It's currently between 7 and 8%.
Of
Okay,
course.
so it's very, very small. We have 60 million people living in South Africa, and just a few million white people living there. So, so when Ramaphosa appeared in front of Trump, and Trump surprised us all with "Turn down the lights," and he started playing what has been happening in South Africa. It was rather embarrassing. I could see how Ramaphosa and some of the members who came with him cringed because they were put on display. They secretly harbor many of the sentiments being expressed in that chant. It is a chant they cherish because it was a chant they sang during the apartheid years. But psychologically, and we know from studying narcissistic large group regression, and I'm referring to a scholar called Vamik Volkan, narcissistic large group regression, historical relics can oftentimes be used in the here and the now to settle historical conflicts in the here and the now with new enemies right in front of us now. So just the mere fact that it is historical doesn't change the likelihood of it being used or being harnessed as a call for genocide in the here and the now. It has happened all over the world.
Of course, yeah.
Right. We call it time collapse. So historical disputes being settled in the here and in the here and the now, enacted. So there's almost a state of mass illusion or mass delusion that the masses regress into, and they see the person in front of them as a token representative, either as the victims of the past that need to be redeemed, that need to be avenged, or as a representative of the enemies of the past that need to be eviscerated and destroyed. Yeah. So he brought 3 golf players with him, which is so pathetic if you think about it. Trump loves golf, yes. So he brought Ernie Els, Johan Rupert, which is I think the richest person in South Africa, the richest person in South Africa, the second richest person in Africa. I think right after some Nigerian multimillionaire, and Retief Goosen, to almost appease Trump and to reassure Trump that things are not as bad in South Africa.
Are they white?
They all three were white. Yes.
That's very
Also,
disrespectful.
I mean, his strategy was so obvious, and I think Trump saw through it. Elon Musk was there, and I'm sure Elon Musk also prepped him, knowing what strategies these people sometimes employ. And then he brings John Steenhuisen, who is the leader of the Democratic Alliance, who's white, who's also the Minister of Agriculture. And he even said, I have brought my Minister of Agriculture, a white man, John Steenhuisen. I mean, it was such a display of tokenism. It was cringy.
Right. But I just want to stop you there. What are those men, in your opinion, thinking as they're performing? They're going along with this ritualistic humiliation, knowing that their fellow white South Africans are being expropriated and murdered.
I think John Steenhuisen is a coward. Ernie Els is a coward. Ernie Els just gave a non-answer. It was just fluff. Johan Rupert has so much wealth in South Africa. He can't afford South Africa to go down the drains. So he would say whatever is necessary for Trump not to sanction South Africa. The only person who spoke the truth was Retief Goosen, because he mentioned that he has relatives still living in South Africa. Some of those relatives have been attacked, and they're living behind electric fencing. So he was the only person who actually spoke the truth. But the funny thing is, none of those three golfers even live in South Africa these days. So when Ramaphosa asked him, when Trump asked Johan Rupert, they know each other from decades ago. Does he what are the conditions under which he lives? And he says he doesn't lock his door. He is so wealthy. Of course he wouldn't lock his door. He has private security paying them hundreds of thousands of rands every month to protect him. So
he doesn't. You don't lock the door when you have a team of snipers.
Precisely. So, but that is hardly the reality in South Africa. The thing is, there are many white people living on small holdings and farms in South Africa. Many of them run commercial farms. Many of them do not. They just live out in remote areas. Many of them are elderly. So there's this aspect of remoteness. Because of that, they're exposed, they're vulnerable. Okay? But there are certain features of these attacks that indicate that this is so vengeful. The only explanation why they would go to that extent of torture for hours. Many of these people are tortured for hours before they die of their injuries or get executed. It is gruesome. I have said every few days, something of October 7 takes place in South Africa. And if you know what happened on October 7th in Israel, you get an idea of the type of suffering and torture white people are being subjected to. Yes, and then people are saying, yes, but it's not just white people. That is true. It is not just white people that are being attacked. In fact, the average murder rate in South Africa is between 60 and 80 murders a day. Average. Right?
Wow.
Now, if you don't have to have a degree in forensic psychology to appreciate that different people can commit the same kind of crime, but for various different reasons or for various different motivations. So in the Cape, we have the Cape Flats, and yes, the rate of attacks and murders in the Cape Flats is very, very high. But that motivation is different because it's gang violence. It's a different context within which it takes place. It's different from these farm attacks. Now, so they're remote. They're because the police is so inept. It takes forever to reach them. The other thing is it's the only type of crime that gets politically encouraged to commit. The second thing is when you look at social media, when some of these cases are being advertised on social or reported on social media, and you look at some of the comments by common people, by general people, general populace, how they celebrate the brutal torture and murder of elderly, of children, the complete destruction of property, of livestock, and of white families, you notice, you realize that there is something going on.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, I worked in the prison service for a year, and I had the unfortunate opportunity to interview some of these farm attackers, farm murderers, who were eligible for parole. And yes, by all means, some were truly remorseful for what they did. I deemed them remorseful. But all of them had a racial motivation. They thought because these people are white, number one, they had money, because that is the stigma. White people are the rich people, see.
Right.
They've been previously unfairly advantaged.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a cause of great envy. So white people have something that we desire. We're entitled to what they we're entitled to what they have. It was unfairly acquired according to the popular narrative, and therefore I'm entitled. And if they don't want to give it to me, I will destroy what they have, and I won't even feel guilty because of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that envious element, that race-based envy.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that has been part of the motivation. So just I want to give you stats.
Okay.
Crime stats since 1994, from 1994 to 2024, 30 years. There have been 6,600 farm attacks. Okay, they've been well over 3,000 farm murders. Okay, now if you extrapolate that in the US, so in South Africa there are 30,000 farmers, commercial farmers, 30,000. In the US there are 3 million.
Wow.
So imagine over a period of 30 years, 4 million farmers being murdered in the US. Okay, that is per capita. So that is when we draw the comparison in terms of statistical equivalence. Then you appreciate the extent of it. It is more dangerous to be a farmer. A farmer is so. One of the things that I read was a farmer is 3 times as likely to be attacked and murdered as a policeman in South Africa.
Well, they're essentially sitting ducks.
They're sitting ducks. Exactly.
It's reminiscent of the Stalin's campaign against the kulaks.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps not as organized on a military scale, but same motivation, same cruelty, and also the same overall devastating effect on the well-being of the entire nation.
Yes. And look, some black farmers are attacked as well, but we don't see this level of extended torture and cruelty. And it is so sad, the next morning when those bodies are discovered, to see the black farm workers mourn the loss of their beloved farmer and family, right? They will be without jobs. Nothing will happen. Well, it is essentially a farm coming to an end. So food security is one of those things that are also being jeopardized by this.
Right, right, right. Just like with the Stalin.
So when people ask, is there a genocide in South Africa, it depends on what people understand under genocide. And if you look at Genocide Watch by Gregory Stanton, there are 10 steps to genocide. Symbolization, polarization, and all those, and then eventually preparation, organization, extermination, and denial. So there are 10 steps. Genocide Watch lists South Africa at level 6, polarization. So 6, 7, 8, 9 is extermination. So you can see
how close.
How close that is. And I wanted to compare it to a country close by. And one of the things that was said in that meeting with President Trump was that it's just a small party. That is what John Steenhuisen said. It is just a small party. Now, let's look at the stats. And I want to compare it to Rwanda. So in 1994, there was the Rwanda genocide. About 7 to 8 million Hutus. That's 85%. So there were about 10 million. The population was about 10 million. So the Hutu population was 85%. The Tutsi population was 14%. The Twa population was 1%. Only 1 or 2% of the Hutus, the Hutu militias, participated in the slaughtering of the Tutsi and the Twa. Okay. And they killed between 800,000 and 1 million people. So only 1 or 2% of active participants managed to commit a genocide. Let's compare it to South Africa. Now, they said the EFF is a small party. It's not just the EFF who have been chanting this song. There's another party that was formed by the previous president, Jacob Zuma. It's called the Mkhonto weSizwe Party. Now, Mkhonto weSizwe used to be the military wing of the ANC during the apartheid years, and they were trained by the Soviets too. So when you combine the numbers of voters supporting Mkhonto weSizwe and the EFF, you don't just get 1% of the population. You get 6.4% of the population cherishing this chant, having these sentiments of wanting to exterminate white people. White people are just, like I said, between 7 or 8% of the population. So they're not that small.
So the genocidal desire is, you're saying, somewhat normalized and encouraged the establishment in us and picked up on then by these, I don't know if they're lower level, but these, sort of street level actors that then carry out these brutal murders. It's just so interesting how the impulses that you're talking about, envy, entitlement,
greed,
and
incompetence, inferiority, shame, yes,
are all also qualities that we see in the sort of woke political ideology that is currently gripping Western nations, certainly the Anglosphere. And that's really, really frightening to me, because it was always very obvious that when I started seeing young people kind of activated in in the late 2010s around racial grievances and then gender, I suppose, grievances against men, but really the racial stuff in particular, it definitely had the same tone to me as or the tone smacked of violence. Like there was violence implicit in the tone. And I'm not saying words are violence, but that was there was a level of aggression in the way they presented themselves and hatred. And that's also been seen in things like books that are made for children, white children, telling them that they're basically the devil, and they need to repudiate their whiteness as if that's even a thing.
Yeah.
And on and on. I mean, I think everyone who reads my Substack has suffered this probably more than I have living in the States to one degree or another. And it's obviously not just the racial issue, it's the gender and many other things. And it's this sort of neo-Maoist fervor
Mm.
that, like, it's we call it a culture war, but really it was a cultural revolution,
Mm.
like they had in Mao's time. I
Mm.
mean, the difference being that ours never went fully kinetic, or maybe it just hasn't done so yet. That's my
Mm.
fear, because to me they seem like very clear parallels, and um, yeah, I mean, it's truly disturbing to see
Yes.
it repeated out. Now you're from your psychologist
Mm.
perspective. What are the traits and or themes that you see in common?
Yeah. So what we see is this moral essentialization of identity. And it's not just national identity, but most of it is national identity, like racial identity. Moral essentialization is the oppressor oppressed binary that is being created. It is very shallow. It's very simplistic. It lacks nuance. So there are crude black and white categorizations that are being assigned to individuals, and individuals are simply tokens or token representatives of these groupings, which assign to them moral culpability or innocence. So you can have an incident where two people would be engaged in a brawl. The white people would, by obvious evidence, be innocent, whereas the other perpetrator might be someone of a different race. But by virtue of the race difference, the suspicion would be that the white person must have done something wrong, because that is the bias. And the other person must, because of their desperation, must have resorted to this emancipatory reaction to oppression, and because of that, justified in their whatever crime or attack or violence. So there is clear narcissistic large group regression being encouraged here, where people identify with these fabricated moral essentializing categories. They identify with these, and according to which then they engage with the world. But when we think in terms of psychological processes, I already said narcissistic large group regression, and if we think of narcissism, I wrote 2 articles on the narcissistic dynamics of woke movements, and there are certain features of narcissism that we need to appreciate. The first feature would be, when we think of narcissism, we think of idealization. The self is idealized, so we have grandiose narcissism. There's another type of narcissism called covert narcissism. I like to conceptualize it as narcissism by proxy, or vicarious narcissism, where by association with someone else who is idealized, I bask in their glory. And then the third type of narcissism is devaluing narcissism. So there's this idealization process. There's the zooming in on parts, either of the self or of others, and according to the parts, so they relate to the parts as if they were the whole. So there's no nuance. They recognize a part of a person, namely their race or their sex, and that becomes the characterization, the moral characterization of the person in its totality, in their totality, either as all good or all bad. And then there is a fusion. Fusion means that within this object relations, the way they relate to themselves and to others, there is this insistence that the way they think is the way that everybody else thinks. So when there is a breaking of fusion, you get this rage, this narcissistic infliction that takes place.
Mm-hmm.
Another way of thinking of the fusion is what they call a narcissistic extension of the self. So they extend their own cognitive emotional realm to imagine that everybody else within this realm needs to agree and echo what I believe or what I think or what I feel. That is also what you see with the transgender movement,
Mm-hmm.
where they demand you recognizing them the way they see themselves. So there's a repudiation of reality. There's an imposition of a wish.
Yeah.
It is idealized. It's idealized to the extent that that reality is being disavowed. My own judgment is being idealized, and you better echo it. And if you don't, I will regard it as an attack, and I will feel justified to retaliate as I see fit.
Yeah.
So the way I arrange this is you see this grandiose narcissism and there's the victim groupings
Mm-hmm.
where the victims receive social credit, social status, and they're just absolutely infatuated with their victim identity and they will flaunt it. For instance, in meetings, they would say, "Hiya, my name is so and so, and I identify as, and I am a cis white, da 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 da." So everything is identity, right? So there you have the the victim based or the victim idealized
Mm-hmm.
grandiose narcissism. Now, obviously, there are people who are not of that category,
Right.
but hey, they can be allies.
Mm-hmm.
So they can bask in their glory through association. And those are the closet narcissists.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the allies. Those are the ones that push for, or the activists that push for emancipation. That they would also declare themselves to be say white, and they would say, "I am privileged. I have to admit that I am privileged."
Yeah.
And they would go into these confession rituals. You remember with the BLM movements and with the death of that vicious criminal called George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
They would go. They would engage in these exhibitionistic displays of humility. Now, obviously, by virtue of their identity, they cannot be grandiose narcissists. But by virtue of vicarious or by association, by proxy, they are being
Yeah.
boosted. And then, obviously, the third is this category of the executors, those who feel entitled to devalue and to vandalize and to organize
That's
rallies and mobs. You remember what happened in Minnesota,
mm-hmm.
and those other cities, and as well as on university campuses. And the environment is ripe for this to happen because we live in a time where we've coined a new term, and that is millennial narcissism.
Okay. Yes.
Narcissism is the ailment of our age.
Yes. So, well, first of all, in that group, so the third one is so it's grandiose, covert, and what was the third one again?
Devaluing.
Devaluing, which is also malignant, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
would say so. The other classification system is by a man called Otto Kernberg. Beautiful, wonderful. He is one of the greatest, I would say, psychoanalytic thinkers since Freud. And in our time, he has a different classification system. So my classification system that
Is
I use there is
devaluing.
Mastersonian. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, to me, the worst. It's just my personal opinion how I see these groups. The worst group are the covert, the allies. Those are the
Okay.
types of behavior that I personally find actually most unforgivable because without them, the other two cannot succeed.
They are the enablers.
They are the enablers. Yeah,
Yes,
and I
they
find that
paralyze and
yeah,
they gaslight and they shame.
and they shame and
Yeah.
they prevent solutions and
Mm.
they foment whatever this hatred is that
Mm,
then
mm,
normal people are being victimized
mm,
by. Um, so I always reserve my biggest amount of scorn for them
mm,
in general. And I write about them all the time because I
mm,
write about white American liberals all the time,
mm,
progressives, I suppose you can call them, as
mm,
well as the further left um, ones. But I mean, without their cowardice and
mm,
they're obviously getting off
mm.
on the white savior thing, and
Yes,
it's undignified. It's all these different things. But tell me
yes,
why do we have what is happening that's creating so many narcissists? Because my understanding is that a narcissist is created, and maybe this is too analog. A narcissist is created in early childhood when there is some sort of break or sort of unhealthy separation from
yes.
the mother or the authority, the caregiver,
Mm, mm,
and
mm,
that this is a coping mechanism to develop an ego and a sense of self
mm.
with all this maladaption because they didn't get the healthy connection that we all humans need.
Yeah, that is true. But too good parenting also produces narcissism
How? Tell me how.
because because in too good parenting there is an impairment. There is an impairment of gratitude, and the only thing that helps us to build gratitude is the experience of loss or the experience of a possibility of loss. Because only when you come close to the possibility of experiencing loss, do you get confronted in experience, do you get confronted with the value of that thing in your life.
That's fascinating. Sorry,
And
just
that
to
is also
clarify, you're saying
right.
too good
Yes.
parenting, not too good parents, meaning TOO, like overly good, too much.
Overly good.
Yes.
Too good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that also interferes with individuation and separation, early individuation and separation. So when that gets frustrated, now obviously when a child is say 18 months old and there is the process of individuation separation is being initiated, the protest against it, against that process, can be managed by the parents because the parents manage it because the child's enactments are age appropriate. Their rage, their manipulation, and the parents' um, attunement and explanation and encouragement to individuate, that would be age appropriate. But when that doesn't happen at 18 months and starts happening at age 24, you will see the same rage. You will see the same destructiveness, the
Yes.
same manipulation. All right? The only difference is now those people can be murderous and they
Yes.
can burn down cities
I have to tell
and
you.
they can encourage terrorism.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yes. I have to tell you this. So back in like 2017 or 2018, a video went viral. And it was it was when we still used Facebook. Um, and it was of a protest in Canada
Hmm.
outside an abortion clinic. When I say a protest, it was one woman standing there. A woman, not a large woman, like a
Hmm.
rather small woman who was standing there. I think she was either praying or I think she had a little placard or something.
Inconspicuous.
I mean, she
Hmm.
was harmless. Certainly, she was
Yeah.
certainly physically harmless. I mean, I
Gotcha.
think she was making a statement, but she was not physically harming anyone. She was on a street corner, a public street corner.
Okay.
She wasn't like blocking a door or anything. And this very tall young man was screaming at her in this video, in the clip of the video. And he's this tall, lanky man, an adult. The body of an adult. But the way he was screaming and the way he was interacting with her reminded me of a very small child.
Yes, a
It was
toddler.
very much a very small child, and I raised a child, so I'm familiar with what they're like when they have tantrums,
Hmm.
between the ages of 18 months to 5 or whatever, they kind of grow into themselves a bit. It was very sort of high pitched. It was very hysterical. It was very inarticulate, and he was working himself into this lather that ended with him roundhouse kicking this woman to the head. So somehow, and I say this over and over again about these woke young people, somehow they manage to be simultaneously pathetic and ridiculous and also murderous.
Mm,
And I've never seen anything like it before in my life
mm,
because it was, I mean, it was so beneath any man, his behavior. And yet it was a baby behavior. It was a toddler behavior. And it escalated to him physically injuring and assaulting quite seriously. That's a serious assault a woman who was presenting no threat to him whatsoever. And that was the moment I saw we are dealing with an army of misbegotten children,
yes.
adults' bodies, and this terrifies
Mm,
me.
yeah. Yeah. And that is why they also have an impaired capacity to bear accountability and
Yes.
responsibility. Because they need to be dealing and be confronted with their own imperfections.
Yes.
And because of the impairment of that necessary individuation and separation, where they start learning to deal with their own mistakes, their own discomforts and distresses, and they start incorporating not only the nurturing, or they start well they should have started incorporating not only the nurturing aspects of mother, but also the edifying, strengthening, encouraging aspects of dad, because that process has been interfered with. um, it never got resolved, and now we're dealing with these adults having these impairments that they've not resolved, develop psychological sorry, my words, developmental milestones, psychologically developmental milestones have not been reached. And I could even see that in that one piece that you sent me with Meghan Markle and Hilaria Baldwin, right? Hilarious.
Exactly.
Where, especially with Hilaria, where she overpossesses, she possesses those kids, and
Hmm.
poor Alec Baldwin is like, he's just the appendix, he's just floating along type thing, right? He's really just a drone.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
He's a handbag for her.
He's a
Yeah.
handbag.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, I was going to say, and
Mm,
I love talking about these two women in particular, so I'm happy going at length about it. But I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound like kind of a joke, but I do sort of mean it, even if it's
mm.
a little bit hyperbolic. Can young people catch narcissism
Oh,
from
okay.
essentially because what we're doing also, and obviously social media has
Mm,
played the biggest role apart from parenting, that's my opinion anyway, in this woke contagion. Um, because social media, the power of these images and the videos and watching other young people, watching
mm,
your peers and beautiful people or people you think are cool, sort of this unceasing tide of imagery coming through your phone and you're attached to
mm,
your phone as a young person that has a mesmerizing effect. And
mm,
even if you have internally, maybe your moral compass is set straight as any young person can, because obviously young people have to it takes time to develop the kind of that strength. But can you be swept away in the torrent, even though you may have been brought up right with sane boundaries, because it's just such an overwhelming cultural force.
absolutely, it can. So we all have a measure of narcissism to begin with. The difference is because narcissism is just, in a healthy way, is just asserting yourself, looking after your needs, prioritizing your needs sufficiently such that you
Mm.
can gain mastery over your environment and even flourish within it, without necessarily encroaching on another person's flourishing. That's optimal narcissism. That's healthy narcissism. Maximal narcissism is the problem, and the environment isn't discouraging enough. In the past, before social media and before this scourge of narcissism, we had we had we had cultures encouraging modesty,
Yes.
especially in Ireland. Don't be too self-promoting, right? In Christianity, for instance, let your left hand not know what your right hand is doing. Don't be like the Pharisees, proclaiming your righteousness on the street corners, but go into your inner room before only yourself and the Most High God, and that is where you display your piety.
Yeah.
So not in other words, not to tarnish this thing we regard as sacred, and steal it and rob it from God for your own gain.
For your
So
own.
these for
Mhm.
your own gain, your own self promotion. That is even in the Bible, that is even regarded as what Satan did.
Yes.
Right.
That was what caused his fall,
That
essentially.
was what caused his fall. That's it. So, um, so we do not have these guardrails anymore. We don't, and also our education system in the States, an education system that was supposed to encourage healthy self-esteem. All it did was it just boosted this narcissism in children,
Yeah.
because it is not the overemphasis of achievement that is a guardrail against narcissism. In fact, the overemphasis of achievement would actually boost the narcissism, is enabling the child to process mistakes, to process um, 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 uh, imperfections,
Hmm.
because then they will learn to be kind towards themselves. They will learn to tolerate the imperfections of others, and they won't have this urge to compensate for their sense of inadequacy
Yeah.
with the over idealization
Yeah.
of the self.
What? Oh, I could not agree with you more. So I've just written a piece, and I've written about this before, how I've noticed, with young women and girls,
Mm.
in the sort of professional managerial class, progressive, blue in the American, context, families seem to be getting this message very strongly that to just be themselves is in no way enough, and their inherent, what I would say, your God-given value, that is within every single human being that is born on this earth. They
Yes.
don't understand that. They've never been taught that, and they're brought up into
Mm.
this world where the value hierarchy revolves around the Pharisees, model. You must be able to show your achievements and your accomplishments and your opinions, which have now become achievements and accomplishments. Also, you must always be able to show them. And even when I went back to California, when I went back to the States last month, and I was in California, and I had forgotten, hadn't been back in the States in just a year, but I guess I had just forgotten how Americans love to broadcast their opinions on bumper stickers and on lawn signs and all this stuff. It's like Americans need to telegraph themselves, okay?
Mm.
It's quite a showy culture, which can have some advantages compared to the Irish Renaissance, but that's it for
Mm.
another time. But
Mm.
so that was in exist the need to show yourself off was in existence before the virtue signaling woke ideology. And now, but that has added like 7 different layers of misery and toxicity, especially to girls who were born girls who were born white, girls who were born girls, and who are being taught from the get-go about the multiple sins of their gene pool, essentially, or their
Mm.
ancestors, and the systems from which they actually benefit. So they have to adopt, a whole new set of identities in order to progress at all in this world.
Mm.
And what's making it worse is that it's their parents that are encouraging this, because their parents themselves, and I say this, people my age, Gen Xers, and boomers did it too to millennials, but boomer parents did not do this to Gen X kids, because I'm the child of boomers and I'm a Gen Xer, and that was not what was happening. But
Mm.
the mollycoddling, the overprotection, and the
Mm.
way that shows up in, some Gen X moms, of this kind of like former indie kid, college educated in like the creative field, or like in working in government or something, is that they try and sort of, they almost like commit mind invasion into the mind of the child and fill the child's head with stories about, sort of cooler times when women had adversity, and then the child then associates that with somehow like I have to experience that in order to be cool. But there is no adversity to be
Mm,
had, because even
mm,
the basic adversity of standing up to a schoolyard bully is taken away from children now. So there's literally no
mm,
adversity for them to
mm,
overcome in the way that we used to experience it in the natural setting, just among playmates and maybe a teacher's mean to you. None of that. All of that's been verboten. So these girls, they're just not allowed to just be themselves. And I mean, what a fracturing, nightmarish existence that must be, and how exhausting that must be. And as we were talking a minute ago, I think the apex example of that is Meghan Markle, who genuinely seems like a legit psycho. And I feel very genuinely sorry for her because, and maybe she's completely different behind closed doors. And obviously, there's been lots of reports of how she's very mean and bitchy and she terrifies staff. I'm like, if that bitch is terrifying you, you need to grow some balls, because like that does not seem to cut it with me. Like I would dispatch her very easily, very quickly. Um, but this just yawning, cavernous need to be liked, and oh, I'm thinking about you in every single way. I mean, it's sort of like it's like Miss Havisham meets Mommy Dearest. It's so unnatural.
it's engulfing.
It's engulfing. And I mean,
Mm.
to the point where she makes bath salts for guests because she wants them to know that she's thinking about them every second. Like, nobody wants you to be thinking
Mm.
about them every second.
Mm.
Certainly not a friend that you're visiting for the evening. I mean, it's so over the top.
Yeah.
And that's actually
She
becoming very clear to just viewers who don't like her.
yeah. She needs the supply. She needs the
Yes.
narcissistic supply. And if thinking about those guests and telling them that she's thinking about them would somehow earn her or lead to her receiving that narcissistic supply, that is all she wants.
Yes. That's
But you see in
exactly
psy-
what it is.
but you see in psychology, there's also this phenomenon called um, projective identification. Now, projective identification is usually associated with borderline personality disorder, but projective identification takes place when part object relations are enacted. Now, part object relations, we like I explained, we see this not only in borderlines, but also in narcissists. Narcissists also relate to a part of you as if it were the whole. And there is such certainty in the way they relate with you that in your reception of these hundreds of iterations of gestural, verbal interactions towards you, you feel like stuck, like you have no other choice than to assume the position this person is pushing you into. And if this person has disdain for you, that is what you will be identifying with. You will feel this disdain. You will feel the rubbish you are in this person's eyes.
Mhm.
And when you said, these people need to grow a pair of balls, by all means, it is just when someone has locked their vision on you and they relate to you in a certain way, it is very difficult not to identify with what they're projecting into you.
Mhm. Yes, yes, you're right. You're right.
Especially, no, by all means, especially if they're so powerful and they know they're powerful, and you are everything they hate in themselves, so they relate to you as the aspects of themselves they so hate.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, actually. And I think that's very fair. I mean,
Mm.
especially when you're talking about, I don't know, CEOs or moguls or
Mm.
very powerful politicians who have staffers that are terrorized on a daily basis. And they're people who actually have very real world power who can destroy your life. And that's a real thing. And I don't dismiss that. I think, but one of the things that I find actually that I really find fascinating about this Markle um, project, like the attempts to make Meghan Markle happen, is that is that fundamentally we're all being presented with kind of a choice. to a greater or lesser degree. And personally, I'm being presented with a choice in a very tiny degree because my proximity to fame is non-existent. Thank God.
Mm.
But anyway, the closer you get to sort of fame and fortune, the more you're going to have to make this choice, which is, um, to what extent do I play along with a system that is obviously toxic, to put it
Mm.
mildly, and probably very exploitative, and run by a lot of sociopaths. And
Mm.
to what extent am I going to engage in this system because my dreams are that I want to be X, Y, or Z as success in some prestige industry? And if you're going in and working for someone like Meghan Markle, who is a patently ridiculous and pathetic creature, in my view, and you're going to allow her, because of her status, her proximity to power,
Mm.
not real power, like her proximity to fame and glory, um, then that's kind of on you. And you, like, people fundamentally are going to have to start making these calculations that actually, you know what, this is bullshit, and I'm not going to participate in this, and I'm not
Mm.
certainly not going to allow myself to be debased and treated poorly by someone for whom, someone who deserves zero respect in this world, other than being the best and most accomplished social climber I think has ever lived.
That's correct. And you would imagine that people in association with her, people who have daily dealings with her, would naturally regard her as someone to aspire towards. So there
Right.
is already this idealization that's taking place. And if someone like that is being idealized to such an extent, they have so much psychological power in this realm, this relational realm that people have with her. And then if she one day decides that she's going to treat you like crap, and you will be on the receiving end of everything that she disdains within herself, your guard will be down, and you remember, you've been worshiping her for a period of time. She's been someone in your mind that you've been aspiring to. You will be on the receiving end of it, and you will totally fall for her projective identifications, and that is the dynamic that will be taking place. And I think it is extremely difficult, especially in I don't know, in showbiz, and like you said, these celebrity circles. But like you, I have absolutely no desire to even come close.
I know. I know. I know. I
Not
mean,
in the least.
it actually is, it's been such an eye opener watching the degradation of our entire culture,
Mm.
at such a fast and like outrageous way. And it's actually been a gift because, first of all, it's made me question, my past assumptions and my past beliefs. It's certainly made me question my atheism, to the degree where I am no longer an atheist. Um, it's
I
certainly
don't
made me.
think I don't think you're alone.
No, I'm definitely not, and I know many
Mm.
people like me, actually.
Mm.
It's so, and for that I am very thankful.
Mm.
There was a time when I was young. I was never like into like I never wanted to be a Hollywood star or anything, but I had professional ambitions and they never came to pass. I crashed out, and I really grieved. I really, really grieved, that my life took that trajectory when I wanted to be like a newspaper, in the sort of the big league of the media.
I really
And
enjoy your writing. You've a lovely way
thank
of
you.
writing, by the
Yeah,
way.
no, and I enjoy writing it, and
Mm.
but look what happened. Like the media, look at the media. It's like, oh wow, I actually dodged a bullet there, didn't I? In fact, rather than being upset that I didn't make it past the gatekeepers, I should be I do thank my lucky stars that I didn't make it past
Mm.
the gatekeepers. Um, but because I have lived that experience, I also it actually makes me sort of even more prone to tough love, because I know when I see young people who are crying because, somebody in a higher up abused them somehow, and because they crush their hopes and dreams, and I'm like, well, then you get new hopes and dreams, because fundamentally, um, professional prestige is not actually a good enough reason to allow yourself to be debased or for you to debase others, or for you to become a toxic woke psycho. It's just not a good enough reason. You're selling your soul, and
Right.
that's on you. There is another way. Yes, it's
Mm.
painful. Yes, you have to go into the cave and mourn for quite an extended period of time, in my
Absolutely.
experience. But then you come out the other end, and guess what? You are so much stronger.
Yeah. Look, I very much see our psychological development as a development of de-narcissification. In other words, stripping yourself of your
Very
narcissism
good.
all the time, to realize, very early on, that is the basis for the Oedipal drama. You are not the center of mommy's universe.
Yes.
Daddy is.
Yes.
There's a rival. And you can't have unmediated access to mom. Number one, you have a immature penis. You can't be pleasuring mom like daddy does, right? And the second thing is daddy standing in your way. So for you to access mom, how about you learn daddy's tricks?
Mm-hmm.
How about you master this thing called the paternal function, the demands of external reality, of pleasure depriving reality? How about you learn the rules of pleasure depriving reality, and let's see what happens. And that is the course of healthy development.
Yes. Yes.
And they learn pleasure deprivation, they learn to survive pleasure deprivation, they even learn to delight in exerting themselves, because in the exertion there is a reflection of their own capability. I always say, mom tells you you're loved, daddy tells you you can.
Very good. That what you know what? Let's end it there, because what a perfect place to end it. It's a bit
Okay.
of a hopeful note.
Oh,
So
this is good.
Jaco, are you taking clients? Maybe someone will want to know. um, where can
um,
people find your work?
so my work is mostly on criticaltherapyantidote.org. I'm a co-director of Critical Therapy Antidote organization. We are concerned with the de-wokeification of psychology. So psychology has been one of the culprits toxifying society these days, because psychology has been wokeified. And we urge people to return to the basics, to the fundamentals of psychology, both the classic psychoanalysis and the subsequent modalities that developed out of that. Um,
Right.
and then the other thing is we have a CTA podcast with Christine Seafen as well as Michael Olin. Yeah. And I will be appearing on various podcasts. That is very nice to have these discussions, and different perspectives added to what we see happening around us in the world. I'll be at certain conferences. I'm looking forward to a conference, the SEGM conference, now in September, where I'll be talking about some aspects of transgenderism. So yes, I will be around, and people will
Great.
see me pop up from time to time.
Well, we have to do another one of these conversations,
We've
because
got
it's
to.
fascinating.
Let's do that.
Jaco, thank you so much.
Thank you.